What's going on, guys? Today we're looking at UFC Fight Night Cannonier versus Borralho, and I'm going to be giving you guys some predictions here and some bets. I won't be looking at every fight, but we are going to go in what I think is going to be the bout order. There's been some late additions to this card with the Ultimate Fighter finale being added to this card, so they had to wait until the final episode, and then a couple of late fights being added, some fighters being scratched, etc. You guys get the deal. So, without further ado, we're going to get started with Vyacheslav Borralho taking on Jaimes Yantop. Now, this is a battle of two strikers who don't want to grapple, and I think it's going to be really good for both of them, considering Yantop looked good with his striking in his matchup against Chris Padilla, but unfortunately was submitted in the first round. And Borralho really never got going against Chase Hooper, who was able to knock him down at least once in that fight and finish him in the second round, and just not a good performance for Borralho. Now, in this fight, Borralho is that's not going to happen most likely for the reason it happened, right? Borralho got knocked down by Chase Hooper not because Chase Hooper is such a good striker, but because he was worried about the takedown, and he doesn't have to worry about that against Yantop. But at the same time, I think Yantop is a really good striker. He is 7 years younger. He'll have a reach advantage, and they're a little bit similar, I would say, in terms of statistically. You look at their significant strikes landed per minute, pretty similar accuracy. Yantop's defense is much better, but he's also faced much less opponents at the UFC level, so it's harder to tell how much weight to put into that defensive stat that he has on UFC fight stats. Now, I think this fight should be closer to a pick'em, and right now, as you can see out with the odds, Borralho is around a minus 210, minus 220 favorite in this fight. So for that reason, I like Yantop as the younger fighter. I think it should be closer to a pick'em in this fight. So I like Yantop to get the win here in this matchup. Moving up the card, we have Denis Buzukja taking on Francis Marshall. Now, Marshall steps in on short notice for Danny Silva. And initially, similar to the last fight, this was a fight that I was looking at Buzukja as an underdog. He was around plus 200, similar odds to the Borralho Yantop fight. And I felt like while Danny Silva looked really good against Kulabau, and I think was a better striker, or is a better striker than Buzukja, I didn't think the odds should have been quite as wide as they were. So I like Buzukja in that fight. Now, this one is very different because Francis Marshall brings a takedown element to his game, a wrestling element to his game that we didn't see with Danny Silva. And it is short notice, so it's not like Buzukja has had time to prepare for this matchup. At the same time, neither has Francis Marshall. And to me, the most intriguing part about this fight is that I think Francis Marshall's camp sees something in Buzukja that they can exploit. And the reason I say that is because this is a tough position for Francis Marshall to be in. He's lost his last two fights. The last fight, it was a first-round finish, unfortunately, against Bulgarian. And he had that split decision loss against William Gomis. So he's in hot waters here. And quite frankly, so is Buzukja, who's 1-2 in the UFC. So in some ways, you could say this is win or go home for both fighters. It's certainly on the table. And so I think, though, that Francis Marshall's camp knows something, or just feels very confident in this matchup to take it on such short notice. And so I'm going to stay away, but I just have a feeling that this could be a good fight for Francis Marshall. Moving up the card, we're going to skip the Michael Morales and Edmund Shabazian fights, although the Mearshart line has been, people have been betting that pretty clearly. So we've got the first of the two Ultimate Fighter finale fights here, and that's going to be Khan Ofli taking on Myron Santos. Now, there is certainly a big reach advantage for Myron Santos, and unlike some other fighters who have reach advantages, Myron Santos does a really good job of utilizing it in his benefit. He fights long, he utilizes his jab, his long range attacks, and he just does a good job of maintaining the distance that he likes to fight at. Having said that, both fighters are really well-rounded fighters who can not only strike but can grapple as well. But Santos, we saw in his fight on the Ultimate Fighter, the first one, where he was out wrestled in the first round, and then as the fight went on, his opponent kind of ran out of steam, and it turned into a striking fight, which certainly benefited Santos. Offley, though, I feel like is going to be able to mix in wrestling at a longer rate. I believe in his cardio. And I think similar to the earlier fight with Yantop and Borshev, I do understand Santos being the favorite, but at minus 200, I feel like that's a bit steep. I think it should be closer to like minus 130. And so I think there's value on the Offley side here. Even though record-wise, their experience is pretty similar, I feel like Offley is a little bit more well-rounded with his experience, having fought in different areas of the world. So has Santos, but I just feel like Offley, his age just gives him a little bit more of a benefit there. Similar amount of fights, so it's hard for me to really pick anything out from that aspect, but I think there is some value on the Offley side. Next up, the final finale with the Ultimate Fighter is Robert Valentin taking on Ryan Loder. These guys are similar sized fighters, but Valentin does have a little bit of a height and reach advantage. 1 inch in height, 2.5 inches in reach, and he is 4 years younger. And the big question with this fight is, will Ryan Loder be able to take Robert Valentin down and hold him down? Because we saw in his second fight on the Ultimate Fighter, when he was not able to do so, it became a much closer contested striking bout. And against Robert Valentin, I don't like Ryan Loder's chances in a striking fight. I think Valentin is just much more violent. He's more aggressive, and there's going to be much more chances for a finish on Valentin's side. So I like Valentin in this fight against Ryan Loder. I think he'll be able to counter wrestle well enough and then use his violence to his favor. Moving on to the co-main event, which is a really good fight, I think, between Angela Hill taking on Tabitha Ricci. Angela Hill is going to have a 2-inch height advantage and about a 3.5-inch reach advantage, which is significant, especially at the strawweight division where it's amplified, right? And this is a kind of like a striker versus grappler match, although I will say Angela Hill's grappling has certainly improved in recent years. And I think Tabitha Ricci has improved a little bit as a striker in the Tisha Pennington now fight. I thought she looked better on the feet. But at the same time, there is a clear difference in the striking in this matchup. So Tabitha Ricci is going to have to get it to the mat for her to win, as far as I'm concerned. And I think she's going to be able to do so. I think it's going to take some time, but I think she will be able to get it to the mat and win this fight. I think, actually, I want to take that back. I think she's going to be able to do it somewhat early, but as the fight goes on, it's going to be more and more contested on the feet. And so I feel like the second round is going to be the swing round here. I think Ricci's going to win the first. I think Hill's going to win the third. And if Ricci's wrestling can hold out long enough into the second round for her to win that, I think she'll win the fight, like 29-28 decision. But I think it's a close fight. The other thing is that at some point, I know Angela Hill kind of seems to be like defying father time here as of late, but at some point that does catch up to you, and Tabitha Ricci does have a She is 10 years younger, and that is significant, especially in a fight that I think is as close as this one is. So give me the younger fighter. I'll take Tabitha Ricci to get it done in this one. Last fight on this card, the main event, Jared Cannonier taking on Caio Borralho. And this is an interesting fight. You have two guys who are similarly sized. It's interesting. Caio Borralho is 2 inches taller, but it is Cannonier who will have the 2.5-inch reach advantage. And similar to the last fight, it is sort of a grappler versus striker bout in the sense that Borralho is certainly the grappler here. Well, he can stand, and he's got his karate style. He is trying to get it to the mat, and he will definitely be doing so against Jared Cannonier. Now, Cannonier has decent takedown defense. We haven't seen him up against an out-and-out wrestler. I know he fought Marvin Vettori, but I don't know, guys. I just don't rate Marvin Vettori's out-and-out wrestling very high. I feel like at this point in his career, he's like a clinch guy who really forces you up against the fence. And Jared Cannonier is freakishly strong. And I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for Borralho to get the takedown on Cannonier. But I do think that Borralho's jiu-jitsu is just so far above anyone that Cannonier has fought recently that if Cannonier makes just a little bit of a mistake in trying to get back up or wrestling off or fighting off the fence, that Borralho's going to be able to get a hook in or take the back, and he's going to be able to control Cannonier for a lengthy amount of time. Now, the other thing to consider in this fight is Jared Cannonier's last fight against Nasruddin Imavov. And I know a lot of the attention is on the finish and it being an early stoppage, and I think that's right, and that made sense. But I think the other thing to me watching that fight was Jared Cannonier didn't look the same as he did in his last fight before he got hurt. And I felt like, that Marvin Vettori fight, he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but then he really picked it up. And obviously he landed a ton of strikes on Marvin Vettori in that fight. And I felt like maybe it's age, maybe he was coming off the injury, but he just didn't seem to have quite the same pop that he did in his last fight. And for me, at age 40, I just can't see myself seeing that trend change. So for that reason, I think Caio Borralho has a good chance to get this one done. I do think the betting line is a little bit wide here, so I am curious if this keeps climbing. Borralho minus 300. I do think there would make sense to take a swing on Cannonier, but as of right now, at minus 250, I think Borralho makes sense. Although this one thing I will say about Borralho in this one, we've not seen him. He doesn't have any 5-round fights, so we're gonna have to see how that goes for Borralho. Can his cardio hold up in rounds 4 and 5? But I don't know, guys. I'm not too worried about that. I think his team, the Fighting Nerds, they're just really well prepared, and we've seen that with multiple fighters and multiple weight classes, and so I don't know. I'm just not too concerned about that aspect. I think Borralho's going to be able to get it done with his grappling in this matchup against Jared Cannonier. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What are some of your best bets for this weekend? I'll see you guys next time. Peace.